Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Public Service. Minister, 2 in every 3 public servants voted down your poor pay condition offer. In response, you said they should be grateful for what they got, publicly attacked and blamed unions, and then refused to return to the negotiating table. What you didn't do is listen to public servants who were telling you about your less than acceptable deal. Minister, will you give a guarantee to public servants that you will now take the time to listen to their concerns around pay and conditions and return to the negotiating table in good faith rather than resorting to the usual CLP finger-pointing and verbal attacks?
Minister for Public Service.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the opposition leader for the question, to which I reject the premise of the question, Madam Speaker, because coming to government we had a debt that we could not jump over, and we went to the negotiating table in good faith and have negotiated along the way for a very long time. And we have, as I've said before, many negotiation agreements that we are to do under this government over the next couple of years. So we have negotiated in very good faith, Madam Speaker, that this was a 3% deal. It is over 4 years, which over the 4-year period works out to be 12.55%. That is an absolute increase when we have CPI, Madam Speaker, at 1.6%. So to say I have not negotiated or the Commissioner has not negotiated in good faith is absolute rubbish, and I reject it. So, as I said, we have fiscal integrity, and we have to make sure that we negotiate in the constraints of what we have. We went out very strongly to say that we have a 3% deal on the table. This was voted down, and so it's not about, what we should actually be saying is under the previous government, Madam Speaker, where they did not negotiate and they saw a pay freeze. They did not have their union mates go out and lobby for a bigger pay increase. They got a couple of, bonus payments. And I pick up on the interjection of the opposition leader, who's actually asked me the question. I'm answering her question to absolutely what is actually going on, Madam Speaker, so she might want to just pipe down and listen. But as I said, we have been negotiating good faith. The unions did nothing under the previous government. They stuck up with their union mates and didn't do anything to make sure that this industry got a better deal. As I said, 3%. CPI is 1.6. We have been negotiating in good faith. We have now put that to
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order, Opposition Leader?
Standing Order 110. Will the Minister return to the negotiating table and actually listen to the concerns that are being raised by public servants?
You have the call, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I was saying, we have been negotiating in good faith. This was put to a vote. It was voted down. They knew that there was fiscal constraints and that the 3% deal was the deal that they were getting. It's not up for negotiations any further now. It was voted down. It has now gone to the Fair Work. It was the one and only deal that was on the table, and they chose to vote it down. So our submission is on its way to the Fair Work, and that's where it's at the moment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Blaine, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, you have announced the Sharing Our History, Securing Future Peace study tour to Japan, giving Year 9 and 10 students the chance to visit Okinawa, learn from history, experience the region firsthand and represent the territory overseas. Can you update the Assembly on what this initiative will mean for local students in my community like Palmerston College, how they can apply, how this program will inspire the next generation while strengthening the territory's ties with Japan and our role in the Indo-Pacific?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Member for Blaine, and I know how passionate you are about opportunities for Territory kids, and Palmerston College is a great school, just like all of our other schools right across the Territory, and it is the CLP government that is giving our kids a unique and unbelievable, unprecedented experience to grow and develop. This program, We've called it Sharing Our History, Securing Our Future, Madam Speaker, a partnership between the Northern Territory and Japan for 6 Year 9 and 10 students to travel to Okinawa next year. Now, applications are already open. They close on the 12th of December. And what this means is we're running a territory-wide competition for all those Year 9 and 10 students to get involved. They will have a historic visit of Okinawa. They will meet with senior defence leaders. They will meet with officials. They will get a greater depth of understanding about Japan and the Northern Territory's relationships around defence, around trade, around education and around tourism, Madam Speaker. People need to understand that Japan is one of our closest allies. They are a central partner, and in fact, the Northern Territory, they are our largest trading partner. And so there is a very, very strong relationship between the Northern Territory and Japan, and that is a long-lasting, eternal relationship we have with them, given our shared history. And so our defence history is very unique. We experienced war on our doorstep, Madam Speaker, and our young people need to know that story. They need to understand our history and how it's shaped us as Territorians, as resilient and forward-looking people who are deeply connected in with our Asian region. And so what we're asking our Year 9 and 10 students is to reflect on a really important question. How did the Second World War shape the partnership between Australia and Japan, and how can it continue to grow in the future? This is about moving forward together and enhancing those ties. And so young people right across the Territory can submit an essay, a video, a song, a poem, perhaps it's a presentation, whatever they like. Young people are very, very innovative, Madam Speaker, and so we're looking forward to their applications. The winners will be announced in February next year so that they can then travel to Okinawa. But this is a bit of a passion project of mine, Madam Speaker, since we came to government. It's something, if you can believe it, one of the first things I tasked the Department of Chief Minister to prepare, along with about 1 million other things, Madam Speaker. But we've finally been able to launch this in September this year, right around the time that I myself was in Tokyo, which of course was my first overseas visit for very, very good reason. Japan is our largest trading partner. We share a very strong defence history, and this is giving great opportunities to young Territorians, no matter where they live, to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Member for Daly, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Public Service. Minister, we all know how critical our health care workers are and what an incredible job they do for our community under very difficult circumstances. Acting Chief Minister Gerard Maley told radio listeners on the 22nd of September that the government had reached a pay and conditions deal with the police, but not with healthcare workers. When asked why, all he could say was the government's focus is on rebuilding the economy, restoring lifestyle and dealing with crime, the same tired lines your team always fall back on. Your governments can do more than one thing at a time, and that should include fighting for essential services who are currently overstretched and desperate for support from the government. Minister, why are healthcare workers not a priority for your CLP government?
Minister for Public Service.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I can see there's a bit of a theme happening here today, and I'm happy to update everyone on that theme. But as I said previously, I absolutely refute the premise that we do not support our allied health workers that are here. We know, Madam Speaker, that our public service do a fantastic job, and certainly those ones that are on the front line each and every day that they go to work. And they should be rewarded, and which they have been in the negotiations that we've been having. As I said, they all come under the one agreement, and that agreement was that there was a 3% deal put on the table. And I'm happy to just go over exactly what I said before, Madam Speaker, because a 3% deal is a 3% deal. It's not let's negotiate up higher, because under the previous government, Madam Speaker, we have no more money to negotiate. We have to make sure that those negotiations are within the fiscal restraints. I've got the Treasurer over my shoulder every time I'm in those negotiations or happening with them. So the fact of the matter is, we have to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible for the Territory, something the previous Labor government, I might add, had no idea how to do. The fact that we came with an $11 billion debt rising on the way to $17 billion, they should all hang their absolute heads in shame, and seriously, there should be more ramifications for them, but they're actually sitting on that side for a very good reason, Madam Speaker. As I get back to the premise of the question, this was a 3% deal over 4 years, 12.55% compounding, and that is a very good deal when we have a CPI at 1.6%. And as I did go on radio before and just say, you know, we absolutely value the public service, but in private business, Madam Speaker, I'd just like to let everyone know that in private business, you actually have to work, go and negotiate with your boss and maybe get a pay rise of a small percentage. This is 3% over the 4 years, 12.55%. CPI is 1.6%, and we have been negotiating in very good faith. The sector knocked it down, and now that has gone to Fair Work. And so we are waiting to hear what happens with that from the Fair Work sector. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplementary question, member for Daly. What is it?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, you say you're negotiating in good faith for paying conditions for our health workers, but you're bypassing negotiations and gone straight to the Fair Work Commission. So why?
Madam Speaker,
Minister.
I'm not sure that the clothiers on the other side actually understand what that good faith is. And sorry, if you find that offensive, I will withdraw that remark. But, you know, I have actually said—
Silence, please.
I have actually said that we have been negotiating. This went to a vote, and the vote was voted down. They said no. So the fact of the matter, Madam Speaker, is that was the negotiating in good faith. The vote got voted down. They said no. It has now gone to Fair Work, where a result will come in good time.
Member for Casuarina, happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
What is your
Thank you,
question?
everyone, for good wishes. My question is to the Minister for Mining and Energy. Minister, we know that NT has the potential to become a powerhouse of the nation through the Beetaloo. Our government has been crystal clear. We cannot rebuild the Territory economy without affordable, reliable and abundant energy for Territory homes and businesses. We know the Beetaloo has enough gas to power the nation for the next 200 years or more. However, that doesn't mean anything if we can't get it to the market. Having pipeline and the other infrastructure built in time to address forecast Territory and East Coast gas shortfalls is essential. Minister, could you please inform the Assembly of the work our government is doing to get Beetaloo gas to the market?
Minister for Mining and Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Casuarina for the question, because he knows how important the gas industry is to rebuilding our economy. In fact, Madam Speaker, he's been out to the Beetaloo for his own eyes and see what's happening out there, to see the power of work that's happening in that area. Madam Speaker, just last month at NT Resources Week, our government announced the approval of the APA Group's pipeline licence for the Stuart Plateau pipeline. I'll call it the pipeline. Madam Speaker, the pipeline will connect Tamboran Resources pilot project in the Beetaloo to the North-South pipeline, Armidars pipeline, which will get gas into the Northern Territory, and that's what we need, Madam Speaker. They've already commenced construction on that pipeline, Madam Speaker, and in fact I'm going down the next month to have a look for my own eyes to see how they're going. A 37-kilometre pipeline connecting Tamboran to pipelines that already exist, Madam Speaker. This is going to be a great news for the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker, because we know the gas industry provides jobs, direct jobs and indirect jobs, Madam Speaker. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. If you want a job in the gas industry, you can get it, because they'll pay your rent, Madam Speaker. They'll pay your mortgage for you. They'll buy you a new car, Madam Speaker, and they'll let you have a lifestyle that you want, Madam Speaker. We know that the pipeline is going to cost $70 million, and APA has already spent $2.5 million in local suppliers and contractors in the Northern Territory. With this pipeline and associated work around it, Madam Speaker, it is expected to maintain roughly 150 jobs. 150 people working in the Northern Territory, spending money here in the Northern Territory. This is super important, Madam Speaker, because we have a gas shortage in the Northern Territory because the previous Labor government failed to build the infrastructure and get ready for gas that we need in the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker. The pipeline is going to support an initial 40 TJs of gas up here to the Northern Territory early next year. Madam Speaker, this is a super important moment for the Beetaloo development. The Beetaloo pipeline is going to get that gas out of the ground and to market, Madam Speaker. Like I've said, we know there's a lot of gas there, but unless you get it out of the ground to the market at a competitive price, it might as well stay in the ground, Madam Speaker. But this is about jobs, about territory jobs, local suppliers getting work out there, spending money here in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, it's going to do wonders for the Northern Territory. We know we're in a shortfall. We've just heard about the economy. This is what gas does, Madam Speaker. It pays for your wages. It pays for the education system. It pays for the health system. It pays for the police. It pays to keep the community safe, Madam Speaker. We are doing as the government whatever we can do to support the gas industry, Madam Speaker, because we know how important it is to the Northern Territory to rebuild the economy. Thank you.
Member for Guadja, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Tourism and Hospitality. Minister, your party talked tough at the last election about standing up and taking the fight to airlines about airfares in the Northern Territory. Your government stand by and post selfies and talk big and act tough, showing the airfares coming to Darwin. But last week we learnt that your government has done nothing to stand by the people of Alice Springs when we lose an important flight from Alice Springs to Adelaide. Minister, can you outline what your government is doing to attract more airlines into Mbantua Alice Springs? We don't want to hear your big talk, we want to see your action. The Tourism Central Australia have said and have reminded the government, Madam Speaker, that there is the Northern Territory government who has the main relationship with the carriers needs to be mindful, making sure that we don't lose services, and that we certainly call on the Northern Territory government to stay vigilant and make sure these services are not lost. Minister, what are you doing?
Time has expired. Minister for Tourism and Hospitality.
Well, you don't care
Will
about
be
Alice
heard in
Springs.
silence.
Thank you, Madam
Opposition
Speaker,
Leader.
and thank you for the question, because our entire team has just spent the weekend in Alice Springs out listening to the people of Alice Springs, and I can tell you now it is starting to look like and feel like and sound like a very different place than it was under Labor. It was actually thriving, and we're talking about coming into a really hot season, you know, towards summer. This week we've been talking a lot about being ready for summer, and of course a lot of work goes into that. So the plan is there that that's going to be a much better summer than it has been in previous years under Labor. And that's because of the work that we have been doing to reduce crime. I mean, we came into government just over a year ago and put forward a heap of legislation to change the way the Territory was, to reduce that crime, to make sure that places like Alice Springs did not have the reputation that it had under Labor nationally for all of the wrong reasons. So that was really serious work that is now starting to show signs that we're moving in the right direction, and that is that crime is going down and the economy is going up. Now, there is so much more work that has to be done, Madam Speaker, but tourism is a big part of the work that has to be done. It's one of our 5 key pillars for growing the economy. And so, of course, we absolutely value our tourism industry in Alice Springs. And there is, you know, they are such hard workers down there, and they need to be supported. And that's exactly why we spend so much time in Alice Springs. That's why we have 2 ministers that are in Alice Springs. That's why there's now a police commissioner in Alice Springs, because we actually really believe genuinely that it's the heart of Australia. But for so many years, they've just been talked to. They've been talk, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, with nothing delivered. But if you keep on...
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order? Member for Guadja.
Order 110. My question was to the Minister for Tourism, and she's talking about talk. We don't want to hear your talk. We want to hear your action. What are you doing to save airlines and to stop airlines pulling out of Alice Springs? That is the question, and you're defending, you are failing.
You've made your point. Attorney General, you've got plenty of time.
Honestly, he was a minister in the previous government for a very long time. I think he was the Deputy Chief Minister, and he absolutely failed his own hometown. Now, I'll remind the member for Guadja that airline and aviation activation actually sits under the Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations. So I will absolutely allow the minister to answer the rest of the couple of seconds that I've got to answer the question.
Member for Guadja, you're on a warning. Your interjections are too much.
And
Minister
thank you.
for
Thank you,
Trade
Madam
Business.
Speaker. I think it speaks volumes that the member for Guadja hasn't caught up to which department is actually doing the work in this space. And I will categorically say that we are absolutely increasing connectivity to Alice Springs. What about the flight to Cairns? That has been an outstanding success. What about the flights that we're seeing?
Take your seat. Member for Guadja, take your seat.
It is an Alice Springs. It's an Alice Springs flight. It's
Member
an
for
Alice Springs
Guadja.
flight, member for Guadja. Perhaps you might want to check the thing. And more importantly, I can tell you that the cost of flights are
Take your seat,
significantly.
Minister. Member for Guadja, there is no point of order.
Well,
the Minister has... You are arguing with me. You can go out for an hour, please.
Well, it's sad.
No, in silence. You will leave the chamber straight away. In silence. Member for Guadja. Minister, have you completed your answer? Take your seat, please.
I'll just very quickly say that the Qantas flight he's referring to was always seasonal. This is not an unexpected or unplanned reduction, and they'll be back in full in March next year.
Madam Speaker,
Deputy Chief Minister.
just raise the point. You just excluded the member for Guadja.
I did.
And then he spoke to you and argued with you after. And under Standing Order 48, dissent from ruling, Madam Speaker, I ask you to take action on that. This is disgraceful that you've made a ruling and then on the way out he continued to talk, he continued to yell, continued to be argumentative. And Madam Speaker, and I strongly believe that's a breach and he needs to be some clear action taken, that if you direct someone out, they can't keep talking and they can't keep doing that what they're doing, Madam Speaker.
Deputy Chief Minister, understanding Order 48, this is a motion, so if you want to pursue this, you have to put something in writing and have it seconded. Look, can I just speak? I hear what you're saying. I'm not impressed with the member for Guadja. He was asked to leave in silence and he kept arguing. Let me sit on this. He is out for an hour and I will make a determination over the duration of question time as to how I will proceed. If that's adequate.
I just ask that you take that, Madam. 41, Madam Speaker. 49.
49. He's already been excluded for 1 hour. I hear what you're saying. Just let me deal with this, but if you want to move a motion, understanding Order 49, he's already excluded for 1 hour. Okay, we'll continue with question time. Member for Fanny Bay, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, over the last year, this CLP government has worked so hard to turn Labor's housing crisis around. Through our Homegrown Territory program, we've helped more than 1,000 Territory families into their first home, and we are growing our housing supply with over 290 new builds in the pipeline and counting. In the amazing electorate of Fanny Bay, our government has helped 70 Territory families put down roots here for the long term, and I know our government is working to help even more Territorians into their homes of their own. Treasurer, what is the CLP government doing to build on our housing success and help more Territorians achieve the dream of home ownership? And what is the federal government doing to help get more Territorians into a home of their own too?
Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Fanny Bay for the question. And Madam Speaker, the member for Fanny Bay is absolutely correct in what she says, and I'm so glad to see people in her electorate putting down roots and wanting to stay in her electorate and stay in the Territory and contribute to the growth of the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, since the CLP was elected, we've worked hard to fix Labor's housing mess and give Territorians hope in their future again. Madam Speaker, that is why the CLP wasted absolutely no time introducing the most generous homeowners scheme in the country. When we came to government over a year ago, the Homegrown Territory Grants program. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to update the House that the CLP government recently celebrated our 1,000th successful application under this program. 1,000 people applying to build or buy a new home. And of course, it was the application for this program in our thousands was Anusha and Praveen, who are now going to build their first new house and put down roots here in the Territory. They are proud Territorians, Madam Speaker, having lived here for more than a decade. Anusha works in childcare and they've been raising their family here for that entire time. And with our government's support, they took up our help to build their first home. We're doing our bit, Madam Speaker, to help more young Territory families get on the property ladder and build a life here by extending our $50,000 and $30,000 grants for new builds. This is giving a new generation more time to keep saving for a deposit, find the right block, contract a builder and potentially free another property for somebody else to rent. At a time when we are rebuilding the economy, reducing crime and restoring the Territory lifestyle, the federal government's home guarantee scheme is locking young Territorians out. Madam Speaker, unlike the CLP scheme, their scheme caps eligibility on property prices at $600,000. And Madam Speaker, over the last year, Darwin has seen the strongest annual increase in prices compared to any other capital city in the country. Yet the federal government hasn't raised this cap by a single dollar. Whilst other capital cities saw a medium 42% increase in their cap under the scheme, this senseless one-size-fits-all policy makes no sense. Madam Speaker, we aren't Norfolk Island and we're not regional Tasmania, where the cap is just $50,000 less. That's why I've written to the federal government to lift the cap to $850,000 in line with the median increase of Australia's other capital cities, to ensure those looking to get a start in a Territory have the same opportunity of those in the southern states. Madam Speaker, it's time Territory Labor's representatives stood up for the NT, like I have when I wrote to the Federal Minister for Housing on this matter. It's time they demanded action from their federal counterparts to lift the cap.
Member for Arafura, what is your question?
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Tourism and Hospitality. Minister, business owners in Alice Springs are deeply disappointed by your government's decision to scrap the art gallery in Alice Springs, saying it would have meant everything to the town.
Stop the interjections.
Minister, did you bother to consult with the business owners before scrapping the gallery? Did you bother to speak to them about it when you were in Alice Springs on the weekend? Or did you just leave them to find out via social media?
Minister for Tourism and Hospitality will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what a great question, because this has been brought up a lot of times this week. And Territorians know very well the history of the Atsiaga, the Alice Springs National Art Gallery. It's been named a number of things over the years because it has been an ongoing saga for Alice Springs for a very long time, near on a decade, where the previous government was going to bring it forward. It was this huge, big monstrosity. And maybe back then, if it had been built at the time, then it would have actually been amazing for Alice Springs and it would have brought in so many people from around the world. And I think it could have been an amazing project. But years and years on, nothing had happened under Labor. And so when we came to government, the Chief Minister immediately said, right, we're going to move on this. We either do it or we don't. This is what it's going to take, and I don't need to go through the story about that because the Treasurer, the member for Namatjira, and of course our other minister down in Alice Springs, the member for Breitling, has gone over this time and time again. We had to draw a line in the sand, Madam Speaker. The federal government literally said, well, we're not going to fund it. We keep moving the goalposts. Let's keep changing it. And so, of course, it just could not go ahead. So I don't think that it should be the blame should be on the CLP. This is squarely at the feet of the feds. Where is Marion Scrimshaw right now? Like, she hasn't said boo about this. And she's the local member for the feds. I mean, she should be fighting for Alice Springs. She should be fighting for the Northern Territory, but she said nothing. She should be fighting for Alice Springs. If that's where she lives, that's who she represents. Where is she on this matter? It is devastating for Alice Springs. They should be so disappointed. When we were down there on the weekend, people were like, yeah, we're disappointed, but you know what? We've been hearing about this gallery for the last 10 years, and quite frankly, we're so glad that there's maybe going to be a line in the sand shortly, and of course, a couple of days later there was. So, Madam Speaker, it is very disappointing that that art gallery is not going to go ahead. But now at least Alice Springs as a town can move forward, and of course, there's a lot of investment going into Alice Springs from the Northern Territory
Minister,
Government.
what's your point of order, Opposition Leader?
Standing Order 110, the member for Arafura clearly asked the Minister, did you bother to consult with business owners before scrapping this important project?
Minister, you've got the call.
I know Labor never used to like consulting with people of the Territory, but we just spent the whole weekend as a whole team, 17 of us in Alice Springs, all weekend.
Opposition Leader, you are on a warning.
We met with several business owners in that time. We had functions, we were out talking to businesses, out on the street, in the mall. We absolutely consulted with business owners throughout that whole period, not to mention the previous whole year and the 4 years that we were all in opposition. Like, we have been discussing these things with Alice Springs for a very, very long time. So to come in here and accuse us of saying we're not consulting with businesses in Alice Springs is absolutely disingenuous, because if you were in Alice Springs speaking to those people, then you would very well know exactly where they sit on this situation. And it's at you and it's at the federal government.
Member for Wanguri, what is your question?
Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations, responsible for Asian relations. Minister, October Business Month is the Territory's premier business event, running for over 3 decades now and continuing to inspire and empower local enterprises. This year's theme, Play to Our Strengths, highlights digitalisation, workforce deployment and business resilience, key priorities for driving economic growth and innovation across the Territory. With more than 200 events delivered over by 75 partners, can you update the Assembly on how October Business Month 2025 is supporting Territory businesses to grow, connect and succeed? Thank you, Minister.
Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Wangari for the question. I know what a passionate advocate you are for the small businesses in your electorate, and I really appreciate how you're always standing up and fighting for them. Look, this year's OBM, Madam Speaker, has just been incredible. This is an iconic event that was established, as the member for Wangari said, 31 years ago by the previous parent CLP government. We have been there backing businesses for such a long time, and there are more than 200 events and educational and program events that have been put on through this October Business Month, and they're delivering information and support to businesses across the Northern Territory, both online and in person. So critical that this information gets out to our regional businesses, Madam Speaker. And I was really privileged to attend 2 keynote events just recently, one in Alice Springs, one here, with the incredible Carolyn Creswell, the founder and CEO of Carmen's Kitchen, who was superb and so generous with her time and sharing her business secrets with aspiring businesses and entrepreneurs in the Territory. And we are absolutely thrilled that as a government we are able to bring people of this calibre to the Northern Territory to sit down face to face and talk with our Northern Territory businesses. It is such a great opportunity for them to learn. And we also in OBM make sure we celebrate the Territory business successes, Madam Speaker, and it was great to hear from entrepreneurs across the Territory such as Annalise Grisolia, who is the Hanky Panky Lounge and Bar Kokomo operator, Dan Richard, Humpty Barramundi, who I had the privilege of spending some time with in Osaka, where his product was on the world stage, Paul Graham from Asbuild, an Alice Springs businessman who is doing incredible work, and they were so generous with their time to be able to share their expertise and their knowledge and the do's and don'ts of how you do business in the Territory. And that, Madam Speaker, is what OBM is all about. Yet it doesn't stop there. There is programs on digital marketing, practical sessions on topics around how to build your own website in an hour. I think AI might be involved in that. Business forums, workshops on building financial literacy, you name it. If you're running a business and you want to know how to get that business up and running and what the pitfalls might be and what the solutions are to mitigate against those risks, OBM has something for you. And best of all, Madam Speaker, OBM events in the main are free of charge. They are absolutely 100% backed by the Northern Territory Government, and they are designed to ensure that businesses small, medium and growing into large have the resources they need to be successful in our Northern Territory and expand across Australia.
Leader of the Opposition, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, you were recently quoted that you and your government have banned trans women from being accommodated with other women in prison. However, internal department documents state that you have not, and you still operate your government under the 2021 version 4 directive, and that still applies in corrections. Chief Minister, I condemn your divisive comments about our Territory trans community, and my question to you is, why have you misled Territorians and the public and once again stomped down on minority groups to get a headline instead of leading for all Territorians?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and let me be very, very clear. Under Labor, if you identified as a woman and you were a man, Labor was happy to put you in the women's section of the prison. Now, that presents obvious concerns and challenges, and we have seen that borne out in the horrific national reporting that we have seen, which of course was broken by the news broken by the Australian, in New South Wales and in South Australia, where women in prison have been horrifically victimised. Now, in October 2024, which is just a couple of months after the election, that policy was changed. And I think the question needs to be asked. Labor didn't let Territorians know about that change. How do our community feel about what Labor did? This is about protecting the dignity and the safety of women. It is just fundamentally basic.
Minister, there is no point of order. Why are you standing up, Leader of the Opposition?
Standing Order 110, relevance.
There's no point of order. She's only 1 minute into her speech. I think you need to give the Minister an opportunity to answer the question you so eloquently put to her. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's typical of Labor. They ask the question, they don't like the answer, and that's very, very typical of the ideologically way in which they do business, the social engineering that they are absolutely obsessed with. And it's not just Territory Labor who drank the social engineering Kool-Aid and ended up in opposition, Madam Speaker. This is happening right across this country. Now, what I've been talking about in the last couple of days has been borne out by the facts. The facts have shown that women have been horrifically victimised in interstate prisons. And my point is to make Territorians reassured that we are explicitly clear in our policies, we are explicitly clear in our direction and in the way in which corrections manage these things. Now, I don't know what you're reading or what you might think, but at the end of the day, I am expressing very explicitly the what happens here in the Northern Territory. Now, we have no men in women's prisons across the Territory. We have 3 people, I believe, who identify as trans in the men's section. And at the end of the day, this is about dignity. Now, I have no concern how people live their life. People can live their life in any way they can, but where a government, in any way they want, where a government steps in is when it impinges on other people's rights or when it is a government-controlled facility, for example, a prison. Now, we have a duty of care. As the state, as the Territory, we have a duty of care over people in our prisons. That's why we have a youth prison, so that young people are not mixed up with adults. We don't do that. It's why we have a separate section for women than we do with men.
Chief Minister, take your seat. What's your point of order, Opposition Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Standing Order 110, relevance. Why have you misled the public when your policy does not match what your headline statement has made?
Please continue, Chief Minister.
And you are wrong, okay? So I've moved on because you're wrong and I'm right, and that's just the way it is, and you can't accept it, and that's fine. But I've answered the question. I don't think I could have been clearer on this issue. I think everyone else in this country understands where the Territory stands on this issue.
Member for Karama, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Tourism and Hospitality. Minister, the Territory has just kicked off a new cruise ship season following a record-breaking year for visitation and spending, which I can say is confirmed by many taxi drivers living in Karama and Malak. We know the cruise sector brings enormous benefits for local businesses, especially during the shoulder season when many operators rely on that trade. Minister, can you please update the House on how the cruise industry is supporting the Territory's tourism recovery and how this fits with the government's broader work to rebuild the economy and create jobs right across the Northern Territory?
Minister for Tourism and Hospitality.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Karama. I love how you highlighted that the taxi drivers have been talking out there in Karama and Malak because they do a mountain of work to get people in and out of the city, of course, when those cruise ships are here. But also thank you to all of the people in the tourism and hospitality industry that live in Karama and Malak and Nucky's Lagoon, of course, because they all do a fabulous job. We have an amazing tourism and hospitality industry here in the Northern Territory. And we do love our cruise ships because the cruise ships come at a time when it's traditionally very quiet with tourists in the Northern Territory. And we see them come across the harbour and it looks spectacular, but it also brings a lot to the Territory economy. And Madam Speaker, in the season for 24-25, that was actually the biggest cruise ship season we've had on record since the birth of it. There was 129 ships in Darwin, which is a monstrous amount. And of course, there was actually 145 in total across the Territory because they don't just stop in Darwin, they stop in a lot of other places around the coastlines as well. So that's fabulous. And of course, that is delivering $181 million to the Northern Territory economy. A big number, and 527 local jobs, right? That's some of those people in Karama, Malak and Nucky's member for Karama. The other thing I want to highlight is the passenger satisfaction. At the moment, it is absolutely sky high, which means that the tourism industry, the hospitality industry and the Territory is putting on a really good show for our tourists that come on the cruises. We had 91% of passengers rate their visit as excellent, which is the top marks. But we also had 61% who shopped in Darwin, which is an amazing result. More than a third dined in our local restaurants and cafes. That's really good, right? They used to cop a bit of flack for not spending money in here. Well, they absolutely are. They were this time around. So well done to our tourism and hospitality industry. Now, of course, we are expecting by the end of 2025, really good news that another 60 expedition ships carrying 11,000 passengers are going to be here, which is fabulous when it gets really hot and we don't have as many other tourists from other places around the world. And of course, next year, we've already got booked in, scheduled, 104 ships, which is 70,000 visitors. That's what's scheduled. We still have more that get added to the books over the year, so it's a really good amount. Now, I want to highlight before my time is up, Madam Speaker, this is very different to what it was under Labor, because people may remember that under Labor we had a crime crisis in the city and captains of ships were telling the passengers not to go to Darwin City. Absolutely disgraceful. And you know why? Because of the crime crisis. And then when the Labor was asked about this on radio, guess what their answer was? Well, we're working with the operators to change the times and days that cruise ships come in. Now, that is not tourism. That is a Labor legacy which we had to come in and fix, and we've done that, and it's really exciting that the cruise ship industry is alive and well and looking like a bumper season again, Madam Speaker.
Member for Mulca, what is your question?
Thank you, Minister. Question to the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment. Minister, you stated that media, that the Larrakia Nation, Lakeland Nation and Sacred Sites Authorities, Hill, will not be affected by the hotel development at the waterfront. But I have been advised by Larrakia that the sacred site at Stokes Hill will be significantly impacted because of the height of the hotel. What authority do you have to speak about the sacred site on Larrakia land, and why are you pushing forward to decorate a sacred site known?
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much, Member for Mulca, for the question. In regards to the question, obviously there's been a lot of conjecture in regards to the waterfront process that's been undertaken, Madam Speaker, and I want to be really clear with everyone in the chamber to understand the process that's gone through. Back when the waterfront was first designed, constructed, it had to get an ARPA certificate, Madam Speaker, and that ARPA certificate obviously highlighted any sacred sites that were nearby, where they could build and where they couldn't build, Madam Speaker. There is currently, for those that are unaware, there is an 11-storey building at the waterfront, Madam Speaker, and basically the process that has now been undertaken, a builder has wanted to build a construction, a process, a hotel, which has gone through all the processes, Madam Speaker. There is a certificate in regards to the Waterfront Corporation. that now is able to be transferred. There are able to be additional people added to that in regards to that construction project down at the waterfront. Obviously, it is now up to the proponent whether they proceed with that project, Madam Speaker, but I want to be very clear. We want to ensure that sacred sites are protected, Madam Speaker. The waterfront has been constructed, and the waterfront certificate that would allow that to be constructed is there in perpetuity now. We're ensuring that we know where those sacred sites are, and that construction obviously happens so it doesn't impact them, Madam Speaker. This is what is so important. Going forward, we'll continue to work with all relevant people, stakeholders in this boat, to ensure that we can continue on. And Madam Speaker, I look forward to obviously working with anyone in regards to this as we progress. Thank you very much.
Member for Daly, please refrain from interjecting and making insulting comments across the room. Member for Goyder, what is your question?
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Education and Training. Minister, our government is committed to rebuilding the economy and delivering a better quality of life for all Territorians. Vocational education and training is the backbone of our workforce, crucial for equipping Territorians and our closest offshore neighbours with the skills needed to drive regional growth and position the Northern Territory as the best place to live, work and do business. Minister, can you please update the House and the member for Fanny Bay's daughter, who is in the gallery joining us today, on the steps the government is taking to increase workforce participation and skill development through VET, particularly how we are fostering a strong and stable workforce in partnership with our nearest neighbour, Timor-Leste.
Minister for Education and Training.
Thank you, Member for Goyder. And now that the member for Fanny Bay's totally embarrassed her daughter, welcome. We all know and welcome you here to question time. I thank the member for Goyder for the question, and as a former tradie, I know, Madam Speaker, the very important work that the vet sector has in rebuilding our economy. I share the member's robust vision of a robust territory, and one that is equipped with skills and knowledge to rebuild our economy and strengthen the vital relationships with our nearest neighbour. Earlier this year, Madam Speaker, the Chief Minister launched our new economic strategy, comprehensive roadmap designed to rebuild our economy with clear priority areas and measurable annual targets. Priority Area 2 of this strategy is to build a bigger, better workforce. So securing the future of the Northern Territory means investing in people, developing a skilled, scalable workforce which is essential to achieving our broader ambitions for economic prosperity and population growth. And, Madam Speaker, a few weeks ago I had the pleasure of attending the second International Skills Week in Dili, Timor-Leste, just a 55-minute flight from Darwin. And it was evident that VET holds great value in Timor-Leste, with strong government and community support for training and employment outcomes. And it was very interesting to have conversations with the people over there, that they too are trying to deliver and build their regions just as we are, with a skilled workforce. An estimated 1,000 participants and 57 international delegates over 10 countries were in attendance. There was a lot to learn and celebrate, as Alan Yang from China, Su Penghua and Columbus Hugh, Malaysia, led a dynamic panel spotlighting skills ahead of World Skills Shanghai 2026. It was great to see firsthand the significant opportunities for mutual learning and collaboration with Timor-Leste as part of our workforce pipeline. And, Madam Speaker, through CDU and CREST NT training partnerships, our Territory is actively engaged in delivering Australian aged care qualifications in Dili, which I saw firsthand and got to speak to the students there. And they will complete their final practice at the end of this year, and they're hoping to come out to Darwin early next year. Nationally, the aged care sector, we know, requires approximately 35,000 new workers annually to meet demand and address attrition. Along with the NDIS scheme, there is a need for an additional 83,000 full-time equivalent employees. So, Madam Speaker, it is critical that we secure a highly skilled, well-trained workforce to guarantee our most vulnerable citizens are being well cared for.
Member for Nightcliff, what is your question?
My question is for the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment. Minister, on September 4th, you publicly declared that the US military fuel tanks on Darwin Harbour were safe and approved all 11 for operation. But the day before, you'd received evidence that they would leak in almost all circumstances, but you approved them anyway. Now, your own department confirms groundwater is still leaking through the safety liners under multiple tanks with repair works ongoing. Minister, why then did you approve the entire facility for operation last month despite the ongoing leaks, and why did you mislead the public by claiming the tanks were secure?
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Nightcliff for the question. Madam Speaker, a building permit was not obtained prior to commencement of construction of the tanks, and in accordance with current legislation, a building permit cannot be issued retrospectively. And you know who we have to thank for that, member for Nightcliff? Through Madam Chair, it's the former Labor government, Madam Speaker. Michael Gunner was the one that went down there with his planning commissioners with his little hard hat on. It obviously wasn't protecting much, Madam Speaker. He stood out there and said, look at these beautiful tanks we're building. You know what they forgot to do, Madam Speaker? They forgot to get a building permit. How stupid can you be, standing in front of a construction project, saying it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread, and you haven't even done the hard work? In the absence of a building permit, Madam Speaker, issued prior to construction, Crowley has provided evidence that the construction meets standards appropriate for its purpose and its location. Verification of this from an NT-registered structural engineer confirms that the tanks meet the relevant Australian standards for construction. Not me, Madam Speaker, the independent structural engineer. Taking the evidence into account, I made a declaration under section 65(1)AA that occupancy certification is not required for the fuel facility. The engineers have applied parameters to determine the project's compliance with the National Construction Code and relevant Australian standards. The result is that the tanks have been constructed to withstand speeds. Listen up, ABC, if you're listening, because I was really upset, Madam Speaker, on my drive into work when I heard them misquote what they're rated to, wind speeds of 249.5 kilometres an hour, which is consistent with Australian standards referenced in the NCC. This means the tanks are constructed to withstand winds equivalent to a Category 4 cyclone. The NCC does not require structures other than post-disaster-proof structures.
Member for Nightcliff, what is your point of order?
110 relevance. I'd like to know, seeing as they are still leaking, why did you mislead the public by claiming the tanks were secure when they are not?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Crowley has obtained full environmental approval for the project and has demonstrated that the bunds around the fuel tanks have the capacity to contain the fuel in the tanks. A condition of Crowley's environmental approval for Project Camus is to include impermeable release prevention barriers. I continue, Madam Speaker. The environmental regulator did not have any evidence that any offence on the anti-environmental laws has occurred at the facility. Crowley has designed and implemented an environmental monitoring program that involves the monitoring of surface and groundwater at the facility, Madam Speaker. Crowley has engaged a qualified environmental auditor and submitted an environmental audit program which has been approved by the CEO of the environmental regulator. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Fong Lim, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is also to the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment. Minister, we know that when a population grows, so does the demand for new housing. And with that comes the creation of new suburbs. Now, with the CLP's First Homeowners and Fresh Start new grants extended until September 2026, our own demand for housing is likely to increase. Recently, the first new suburb in over a decade was announced, named after the great Dr. Valerie Ash. Now, Minister, could you explain why naming suburbs holds such significance for the Territory lifestyle and why Dr. Ash was chosen as a fitting namesake for our new suburb?
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Fong Lim for the question. It is a very timely question, and it's wonderful to be able to speak today about such an incredible Territorian. Madam Speaker, can you believe that the Northern Territory has not had a new suburb name since 2013? And it was an absolute pleasure to stand alongside the family and friends of Dr. Valerie Ash AM as we unveiled the sign for the new suburb of Ash. Wendy, Dr. Valerie Ash's daughter, was there, along with many other family members, and former Dr. Valerie Ash's dog, Freya. She made it there, Madam Speaker, to see the unveiling. Dr. Ash was a distinguished microbiologist and researcher, dedicating much of her life to studying disease prevalence in the Northern Territory. Her contributions to medical research and public health have left a lasting legacy in our community. One thing that I didn't know until I spoke to Wendy, Madam Speaker, was melioidosis, otherwise known as Nightcliff Gardiner's disease, something where the moist soil can get into cuts and cause issues. This was something that Dr. Valerie Ash researched in great length, Madam Speaker. Following the unveiling, her daughter Wendy shared with me that her mother had often been overshadowed by her father's achievement, Austin Ash, and that made this recognition all the more meaningful, a moment to honour Dr. Valerie Ash for her own remarkable work and impact across the Northern Territory. Given that the new suburb encompasses the Palmerston Hospital, it was a fitting opportunity to honour individuals who have made such significant contributions to the health and well-being of Territorians. This continues throughout the suburb, with streets named after Larrakia traditional bush medicines and other Territorians who have played key roles in advancing health and healing in our community. There are currently 87 registered suburbs in the Northern Territory. Of these, 12 commemorate women. However, Ash, as I'm told by the department, is the only one named after a Territory woman in her own right, someone recognised for her own individual achievements, not through association with other figures or shared honours with partners or family. Although Dr. Ash was married to former Northern Territory Administrator, she carved out her own legacy through her professional and charitable work. Her influence continues today through the Valerie Ash Memorial Prize for Academic Excellence Award, which is awarded annually by the Menzies School of Health Research. This scholarship recognises outstanding achievement by students in public health and health research, ensuring her contribution to medical service science lives on. The naming of the suburb is a powerful tribute to a woman who made a profound and lasting difference to health research in the Territory. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Valerie's daughter Wendy, Val's friends and family, and even Freya, Val and Austin's beloved dog. It truly was an honour to share such a special moment with you all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Johnston, what is your question?
Madam Speaker, my question is for the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, you said in the chamber earlier today that you explicitly changed the NT Correctional Services policy on the management of transgender, gender diverse and intersex offenders. I have a copy of the corrections policy change which identifies that this was purely a machinery of government change. Chief Minister, can you explain to the chamber specifically what policy change occurred in 2024?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I've been very, very clear about this. What has changed, the policy position that has changed between the then Labor government and the CLP government now, is that you cannot just identify or nominate yourself as a woman and end up in a women's correctional facility. In the Northern Territory, fortunately, we've not had any issues like what we are seeing interstate, and there has been a number of issues and concerns being talked about right across the country, Madam Speaker. We've even had, the New South Wales Corrections Commissioner has actually reached out to our Corrections Commissioner for the details on how we manage these things. And so I reinforce again, we've been explicitly clear. This is about making sure that we have the protection and the dignity of women in our prisons. The Northern Territory Government has a very high duty of care for people in our custody. It's the same, for example, for child protection when we have young people in the care of the Minister or of the CEO. There are a number of areas in which, even in our health system, where we have responsibilities and duties of care to people, Madam Speaker. So this is not normal. It is distinct from how people can live their lives. This is about making sure that we have safe and dignified spaces, that we have very clear policies on how corrections, who are eminent professionals in this, are able to work through some of these complexities. But at the end of the day, it's not complex. If you are fundamentally equipped as a male, then you should be in a male prison, Madam Speaker, and that is our policy. We've been very clear about it. I don't know how much more I can say, Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order, Member for
In
Johnston?
relevance, I asked what specific changes there were in the corrections policy. I'm happy to table what the policy currently says in terms of what I've seen. My question is what has changed, not what policy position, what has changed in the corrections policy? Thank you.
Chief Minister, you've got the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've already just explained that to the member for Johnston, just like I explained it to the opposition leader, Madam Speaker. So it is very, very clear. We've made it explicitly clear, and we now have other state leaders and other jurisdictions looking to the Territory on that leadership on this issue. This is about having a really clear policy so that corrections are able to implement it, and it's about making sure we have this women's safety and dignity in prison, Madam Speaker.
Member for Drysdale will be heard in silence. What is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Mental Health. Minister, it's Mental Health Week and we know the statistics. 1 in 5 Australians experience mental health illness every year, and 45% of Australian adults will be affected by mental illness in their lifetime. And I have no doubt that those numbers are even higher in my electorate of Drysdale. In the Northern Territory, mental health conditions contribute to 16% of disease. This compares to 7% nationally. Residents experience the highest rate of mental health-related emergency department visits nationally. Suicide rates are the highest in the country, and here in the Northern Territory we face unique challenges such as remoteness and social disadvantage. How is the government helping people who suffer from mental health-related disease so they can be the best, strongest and empowered versions of themselves that I know with the right medical care they can be?
Minister for Mental Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Drysdale for this very important question. I know the member for Drysdale is absolutely committed to ensuring we get better mental health outcomes for Territorians. Madam Speaker, I had the distinct honour to speak last week at the 2025 NT Mental Health Awards. These awards celebrate the contributions, courage and compassion of these inspiring individuals and organisations who work to improve mental health and well-being. I want to congratulate all of the nominees and all of the winners of the awards because I know their contribution, their commitment and the work that they're doing in the community. Mental Health Week encourages all Australians to look out for friends and family, support workmates and know that it's okay to ask for help. Everyone has a role to play in mental health and well-being in our community. Madam Speaker, this year's theme of Take a Little Step highlights how small actions can significantly enhance mental health and well-being. Activities like taking a walk, making a special meal, chatting with a friend might seem minor, but those positive effects on social and emotional well-being can be substantial. I encourage everybody to just take that little step, Madam Speaker, and for me, being from Tennant Creek, I take a little step as often as I can by getting out, umpiring football, but this is what keeps me active, connected and grounded in the community. Madam Speaker, our government is committed to investing in mental health and suicide prevention initiatives. This work is supported through a bilateral agreement with the Commonwealth and dedicated local services. Across the Territory, this includes ongoing funding of the Medicare Mental Health Centre in Darwin, additional funding for a centre in Alice Springs, multidisciplinary youth-focused mental health services and community-led pilots. We are supporting key Territory-wide services such as Strongbow Mines, walk-in, talk-in space in Katherine, Mabantwa Kids Hub in Alice Springs, enhanced headspace centres, aftercare for people bereaved or impacted by suicide, and the annual Northern Territory Suicide Prevention Grants. Madam Speaker, our long-term approach is guided by the NT Suicide Prevention Implementation Plan and the NT Mental Health and Wellbeing Plan 2024 to 29, which ensures a coordinated and locally led appropriate care across the Territory. Just before I finish, I also want to give a shout out to the Mental Illness Fellowship of Australia. I went to their dinner last week at Silks, and again, the work that MyFant is doing on the ground in the Northern Territory is commended. Thank you. Madam Speaker, yes, I move that any further questions be placed on the written notice paper.
I'd firstly like to acknowledge the member for Fanny Bay's daughter in the gallery. On behalf of honourable members, welcome to the gallery. Again, I would like to address the matter of the exclusion of the member for Guadja from the chamber at around 2:23 this afternoon. Under Standing Order 49, I initially asked the member to leave the chamber for 1 hour, given his disorderly behaviour. The Deputy Chief Minister asked for the member to be named, and I have considered that. It's not something I want to do, is name any member for their disorderly conduct, but I am bound by a set of rules called the Standing Orders, and the Standing Orders very clearly outline the conditions on which people should be named if necessary. And some of those include persistent and willful obstructed, that the member who has persistently and willfully obstructed the business of the Assembly, used objectionable or disorderly words, persistent and willfully refused to conform to any standing order, and persistently and willfully disregarded the authority of the Speaker. I think the member for Guadja was in breach of that, and so therefore I am using Standing Order 51 to name the member for Guadja. So I move that the member for Guadja be suspended from the services of the Assembly. All of those in favour say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The period of suspension will be for 24 hours. Therefore, the member for Guadja can resume his role in the Assembly at around 2:23 tomorrow. As I said, I issue this with a great sense of reluctance. I don't want to be naming people. I don't want to be throwing people out of the chamber. But there is a code of conduct that we all have to adhere to, and there is a set of rules that we have to adhere to. And it is my job as Speaker to make those rules, enforce those rules, and make sure that people are heard in silence and with respect. So, on a rather negative note, to continue the business of the day.